Hey, thanks for showing up. I'm Jordan and you're awesome. And today we are going to talk about pencils. Yes, not these pencils. These pencils. You know, the fancy ones with no eraser, the one that are made for drawing. We're going to talk about those. So let's do that right now. Let's go do that right now. Draw. You ever been to the art store and noticed all those pencils on the wall there and trying to decide which one is best for you? Maybe you were like this.
Why are there so many? What are all the numbers and letters mean? I don't understand what I don't know.
Or maybe you were more like this. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of trouble and by opposing end them. To be or not to be? Or maybe you're like this guy. Well, that's okay, because I did too, and I have an answer for you, what they're for and what they're best to use for. So let's take a look at those right now.
Well, hello. Welcome back to my hands. This is our value scale, and value is just the lightness or darkness of something. So we're going to do that. We're going to test the lightness to darkness of our pencils here, and I'll talk a little bit as I'm doodling, and yeah, we'll be back in a little bit. Okay, let's get it going. Now my value scale ranges from 4H to 6B, H standing for hardness and being the lightest pencil lead, while B stands for blackness and is the softest lead. All pencils are made with a mixture of graphite and clay, so pencils with more clay content will hold a firmer tip and last longer but write much lighter, while pencils with more graphite are much softer, like a baby's derriere, but wear down much more easily. Some pencil sets can range from 9H to 9B, but that's just too many pencils, and let's be honest, those extra numbers don't really add anything. So think about your art style. If you prefer more of like a sketchy line work, you might consider the harder, difficult to budge H pencils. But if you're more into three-dimensional and more developed illustrations that can be spread around the page, you should migrate towards the softer B side. Now I'm pressing as hard as I can with each pencil without damaging the paper. And yes, the transition is subtle, but remember, these are just the darkest opacity of each pencil, and each can be used in a range of values individually. Additionally, consider the smudge test and how it would benefit your illustration. If you want your sketch to stay put, the hard lead is the way to go, but the softer leads smear like butter, which can be a problem or a benefit to your drawing.
Quick interjection. I also did a video about different kinds of erasers and what they're good for too. So if you want to take a look up there real quick and then just kind of see how those help with the erasing stuff part. So just so you know. So I'm just using your average pink rubber eraser, which is great for taking up most graphites, but notice how it's more difficult to pick up those harder graphites because they tend to carve into the paper to make the mark. But the softer graphites sit on top of the paper and can be erased pretty easily. This is a benefit so you can get as dark as you want and not have to worry about mistakes because you can still rub them out pretty easily, or even use different types of erasers to pick up different amounts of graphite. So I know a lot of you are probably thinking, do I really need all of those pencils just to draw that? And the short answer is no, you really don't. In fact, I will prove it to you through the magic of editing. I'm going to go back in time and draw this using only these 4 pencils. Let's go do that now. Real quick before we do that, I forgot to mention that these 4 pencils are my H pencil, my HB, a 4B, and a softer 6B. And like I was saying before, you can change the value of each pencil depending on how much pressure you put on it. So I'm starting with the lightest pressure, just letting the pencil rest on the paper as I draw, and then really laying on the graphite towards the end of each section. Remember, pencils can always get lighter than their designated number and letter, but they don't get any darker. Keep that in mind so you don't have to keep switching to harder pencils and end up tearing your illustration. In fact, most of this scale can be done with just one standard pencil. Let me show you. But first, coffee!
This is just a standard number 2 HB pencil, and just like before, I'm holding the pencil further from the lead and just resting it on the paper as I slide it across to get the lightest value, and then I shift my hand closer to the tip to get that darker value. And even with just this one pencil, I can get a value ranging from 4H to almost 4B. So based off what we know now, I started with my lighter H pencil to rough out some thumbnails or small simple sketches to decide on an idea of what I wanted the illustration to be. I decided to keep it simple since we're not doing anatomy today. That's another video. This is just to demonstrate the different values. I kept my H pencil as I roughed out the shape and outline of my little character, not worrying about erasing anything at this point. I just wanted to get an idea of where I wanted things to go, just bulking out the overall character shape, anatomy, and adding the rough armor parts. Next up, I switched to my HB or standard pencil to pick out the lines I like and add some more definition to the character, while leaving the lines that I know I want to be lighter later on alone. I started to begin developing some final details to the armor and anatomy, like muscle definition and fingers, and just adding overall contrast. This darker value sort of hides all those unwanted lines for now, but I'll wait to go back and erase those till later. And here I decided to make his little spear lance thing a pencil, because funny. Now I switched to my softer 4B pencil and I begin to knock out the darker shapes that I know will be eventually in shadow, and I also start rounding out the metal bits to help give this object that has 2 dimensions, height and width, the illusion of 3 dimensions, height, width, and depth, so it doesn't just sit flat against the paper. Which reminds me, in my next tutorial, we'll be going over perspective, so check that out next week. But I digress. This pencil is certainly on the darker end of the value spectrum, but I'm really just using it for the midtones or the middle values, and I'll build up these tones until I get a better idea of where this night thing is going. Now, I'm just adding a little more definition in the metal, like reflection, so it looks round and shiny. I did finally use my eraser here a little just to pick out the parts that I like the most, just a few little touch-ups to the lance spear pencil thing, and I use just this one pencil to draw those 3 different values by using varied pressure. And when I feel like my 4B pencil isn't going to get to the dark value that I want, I finally switch to the softest pencil, my 6B, to get those blackest blacks in the shadows and really make things pop. It helps give the illustration contrast, which makes the white stand out even against the white paper. I also use this pencil to reinforce some of the outlines to give the illustration some difference in line weight, which is simply how thick or how thin your line is. Thicker lines tend to stand out when seen next to thin lines, so it's helpful to use both thin and thick lines and a variation of everything in between so it doesn't get boring. It's generally a good idea to go from light to dark so you're not always erasing dark lines and smudging graphite all over. So I wait to do this part last when I know for sure where all those black soft marks will go. And there we go, a finished illustration using only 4 pencils in our value scale.
So it turns out the question really is to be or not to be. A lot of times, it's both. But experiment to see what works best for you depending on what you're working on. If you're still beginning, there ain't nothing wrong with classic good old Yeller to help you save a few of these guys. But in the meantime, take a look at some of these. Check out this if you want something a little bit newer maybe, or something down here it's sort of related to this video. Oh, and don't forget about that eraser video that I was talking about earlier. A lot of these here. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Stay creative. Goodbye. Coffee ain't free, you know. Draw.